Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, SAP with IK. Hope you're all doing good. So today's video will be on the master productions scheduling, or also known as MPS. So we'll discuss about the concept of MPS and how is it basically different from the traditional MRP, and what all transactions and what all master data do we need in order to execute an MPS for any material in the system. So let's get started. So the master production scheduling is a kind of a concept where you have to plan the materials very carefully. So let's say you have a product in your company which is of a huge value, and you cannot just manufacture it on a rough planning and just keep it in the inventory. But because the handling cost or maybe the inventory holding cost might be huge for such materials. So for those materials, we are going to treat them as a critical part or a critical product which creates a huge impact in the financial aspects of the company. So those products should be planned very carefully, looking at the statistical figures based on your past history of the sales or maybe the consumption of the raw material. In the same way, the components that are required to manufacture that kind of a product would also be an expensive in nature, right? So you'll have to maintain those very carefully, and also the planning for those raw materials should be done very carefully without any excess inventory in the stock as well, or in the plant. Why? Because the handling cost might also increase if you keep on accumulating the stock and maintaining the storage conditions and so on and so forth, right? So for such products, we are going to use the concept of the MPS, or the master production scheduling. So let's get into SAP and see what are the prerequisites required in order to execute the MPS for a product. Okay, so here I'm in SAP. So let me go to MD04, and here is my example for today. It is the API, which is my finished product, and in the plant 1000. So if we go into the details of the MD04 for this product, we could see we have a stock of 300 kgs, and we do have the plant independent requirements in the month of March, April, May, and June. So now here you could see this particular differentiator that basically is between the month of April and May. It says as the end of planning time fence. So what is basically a planning time fence? So the planning time fence, this is mainly described in the material master or maintained here. So we'll discuss about that when we go into the material master. But here in the MRP views, we define the planning time fence for each and every material. So this planning time fence, it basically helps the planner to basically freeze the proposal that has been created by MRP. So let's say these two independent requirements, which has a quantity of 1150 and 1100. So these two will have a planned order when we execute the MPS. So those planned orders should be marked as a firmed planned orders, so that no automatic changes can happen for those planned orders, right? So for that reason, the planned orders created before the planning time fence will always be marked with a firming indicator, but the planned orders created after the planning time fence, they will not have a firming indicator, and they could keep on changing based on the subsequent MPS runs. But whereas the planned orders lying below the planning time fence, they cannot be adjusted by the system automatically, but you have an option to change it manually by the user. Okay, so yeah, so before that, let me just show you the master data settings for the material. So here in the material master, in the MRP1 view, we are going to define the planning time fence. So I've made a separate video on the planning time fence with more examples, and if you're interested, you can watch that from the playlist. So now coming to the MRP settings, the first thing we'll have to do is we have to assign the MRP type that is relevant for the MPS. So as you can see here, the MPS relevant MRP types are from M0 till M4. So let's go into the configuration of this MRP type. and see how is it different from the standard MRP P1 and all. Okay, so let me go to SPRO and then the IMG path. So I'm going into the production and then MRP, and then have the master data, and then you have check MRP types. So if I go into the details of this MRP type M0, it says that the MRP procedure is MPS, so which basically stands for the master production scheduling. So the procedure, it basically differentiates or tells system that the material assigned with the particular MRP type is of an MPS category, not a normal MRP. So if you look at the configuration of the standard MRP types like the PD and all, so that will have the MRP procedure as D, right? But whereas since it is an MPS, we'll have the procedure as M for the master production scheduling. And then if you are going into the CBP or the consumption based planning, that will have the MRP types relevant for the forecast based planning. So once we have this MRP procedure as M, and then we have the firming type. So the firming type, it basically, it tells whether the proposals should be firmed within the planning time frames or not. So the standard configuration, it says that the planning results are not firmed. And also we do have the options saying that the automatic firming and order proposals rescheduled out. And also we have the option to automatic firming without any order proposal. And then you have other options like the manual firming and also the manual firming without order proposal. So now if we come to the roll forward period, so this is basically, moving out the planned orders within the planning time fence or out of the planning time fence. So it says that do not delete firm planned orders. So this is the standard setting, right? It says that if the planned orders are not lying within the planning time fence and which has a firming indicator, so those planned orders should not be deleted during the MPS run. And if you like to modify this, then we have to use this option as delete firm planned orders. But it is not suggestible to change the standard MRP types provided by SAP. But you can create your own MRP type, copying these as a reference, and then make your own settings there. Okay, and if I go to the M1, so M1, there is no specific change in the entire configuration, but the only thing is with the firming type. It says that the automatic firming and order proposals are rescheduled out. In the same way, if I look at M2 MRP type, it has the firming type indicator as 2, and similarly if I go to M3, it has the firming type as 3. So depending on your requirement, you can basically assign the corresponding MRP type into the material master. So now we are into the MPS. So let's go back to the material master. Yeah, so here we assign the MRP type as M1 and then the planning time fence as 10. So this value of the planning time fence of 10 is basically maintained in the work days, or also coming, which is basically coming from the factory calendar. So if we go into the configuration of the plant, let me go there, or maybe you can choose the direct transaction OX10. So here my plant is 1000, and in this plant configuration we generally assign the factory calendar. So the factory calendar here is W8, which is with all days are the work days in that particular week or the month. So yeah, so it looks at the entire 10 days starting from the day of the planning, or the day which you are basically executing the MD04. So let me show this here. So today is 30th of March, and the planning time fence has been calculated as 10 days from the 30th of March. That basically lands at 9th of April. So if you calculate the days, starting from 31st, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So we ended up with 9th of April. So this is where the planning time fence will basically end, right? So now let's try to run MRP for these requirements and see how the planned orders are basically created. So if I go to the run MRP or maybe choose the transaction as MD02 or 01 or 03, let me show you what it tells. It says that the material cannot be processed with this particular transaction. Why? Because this particular MRP type has been configured with the MPS run, not the MRP run, right? So the materials which are managed in the MPS scenario should always be executed with the transaction MD41. So MD41 is a transaction that is used to execute the MPS run, right? MD41 and MD42. So let me show you one scenario where you can add your favorite. So go to environment and go to own favorites and then click on maintain. So then go to new entries. The navigation, let's say I'll keep it as number 6 and the transaction is MD41. So you have these options with initial screen or carry out in the external system or maybe in a new session. So let me choose this new session. So whenever I click on this icon to execute the MD41, so that will happen in a new session, but not in the same screen of MD04. So what should be the text? Should be MPS run. And you also have an option to choose the icon. So I will choose this as the start display. So now you can see that we have created a shortcut or maybe added the MPS run to our favorites in MD04 screen. So now I'm going to click on this transaction, the shortcut. So which basically created a new session based on our configuration, and it opened a new window for the single item multi-level planning in the MPS. So now I'm going to hit on enter. So yeah, here we have the statistics saying that the planned orders and purchase requisitions are created. So if we go back to MD04 and just refresh it, you can see that the planned orders are basically created outside of the planning time fence, and it has been proposed with a rescheduling message. So the reason is that if you look at the requirements or the PIRs, we have it in the month of March and April, and we should be able to fulfill these two requirements, right? And we need a planned order for that. But what is the reason basically the MPS has created planned orders out of the planning time fence, and it is actually proposing us to basically reschedule the dates of the planned order to meet the requirement of these PIRs in the month of March and as well as April. And we could also see the exception message, right? So this is all happening based on the MRP type M1. So again, let me go to this SPRO and we'll open the MRP type configuration. Production, MRP, master data, and MRP type. So here M1, it says that automatic firming and order proposals are rescheduled out of the planning time fence, right? So based on that, it is creating the planned orders outside of the planning time fence. But what if we change this to the MRP type M0? So what does M0 basically have? So the MRP type, the MPS, the firming type for this MRP type M0 is with the firming in type as 0, which means that the planning results are not basically firmed, and these are not automatically rescheduled during the MPS run. Okay, so now let's go back to the material master and change the MRP type. In MRP1 view, I'm going to change this MRP type from M1 to M0 and then click on save. And the next thing is that I'll go to, yeah, now we can see that the MRP type has been updated, and now I'm going to, yeah, and you also can see that the planning time fence has been removed from this particular view of MD04. So now I'm going to run MPS run. Okay, the plan orders are created now. Come back to MD04 and do a refresh. Now you can see that the plan orders are created according to the requirement of the PIR or the planned independent requirements, right? So this is in the past date, which is the 1st of March, but we cannot actually create the planned order to be in the past, right? But because the production should start from the future or maybe the current date. So now system has created these planned orders, uh, and it basically has given an exception message should be rescheduled according to the requirement of the PIR. So now if I go into the details of this planned order, it says that the order should start on 30th of March, so which is the current date, and it would finish by the 1st of April. So this is basically based on the in-house production time. So if I go to the in-house production time here, let's take a look. So the in-house production time is maintained in 2 work days. So always the in-house production time will be maintained in the factory calendar days. So since we have all days as working days, we are just calculating 2 straight days from the current date. So now let's change the MRP type maybe from M0 to M2, which has the planning time fence included in it. So I'm going to choose, select the MRP type as M2. Let's see how this works. Let me close these windows, refresh, and we could see that the planning time fence has again reappeared. So now I'm going to run MPS again. Okay, the planning is done, and do a refresh. Right, so here we can see that the planned orders, these are basically moved inside of the planning time fence based on the requirement dates. We know that, right? But if you look at the firming indicator, which has this the star or the asterisk at the end of the planned order number, this is basically the firming indicator, right? So if we go into the details of this planned order, maybe go into the display mode, and you could see that, sorry, let me go to the change mode. Yeah, so here, if you look at the firming checkbox for the planned orders, so this is not yet activated or checked, right? Because this only happens if the user manually changes any of the master data that is already there in the planned order, which has been created through MPS or MRP. So only then the checkbox will be activated or checked. So without that particular indicator, we have this firming indicator here, and the reason is that this planned order got created automatically based on the planning time fence and also the MRP type. So the MRP type M2, it basically works along with the planning time fence. So it means that, I mean, by looking at this screen of MD04, we can easily understand that the planning time fence ends on 9th of April, and the planned orders created within or below this particular date will be firmed for planning. So no further changes can be done on these two planned orders through the MPS run, right? But whereas in the next MPS run, the planned orders lying outside the planning time fence, they can change. So let's check that. So I'm going to run MD41 here again. But here I'm going to choose the planning mode as delete and recreate planning, which is my option 3. So what does this option basically do? Delete and recreate planning data. So the existing planning data or the proposals created through the previous MPS or the MRP run, these parameters, these elements would be completely deleted and a new proposal will be generated through the MPS or MRP run. But please bear in mind that the planned orders or the purchase requisitions that has this firming indicator or the asterisk sign over there, these cannot be changed by the MPS or MRP run. So let's take a look at that. So the first two with the firming indicators, the planned orders are 96942 and 96943. So these two should not change. So that is what we expect from this MRP type. So I'm going to execute, and here I'm using the option as delete and recreate planning data. So the MPS is done. Going back to MD04 and do a refresh. So now you can see that there is no change in this particular data, right? So let me do another run. MPS, delete and recreate planning data. And the next planned orders here are 6944 and 6945. MPS is done and do a refresh. Right now you can see that the planned order numbers that we have seen earlier, like 44 and 45, they are now changed to 6950 and 6951. But whereas the planned orders with the firming indicator are not touched by the MPS run. So here always, you have to make sure that the planning time fence is properly maintained by the planner, where he feels that the planned orders created within this particular planning time fence should not be deleted by the MPS run. Okay. However, there is a flexibility where you can manually delete these planned orders. So let me show you that. So go to the change mode of the planned order and then mark it with a deletion indicator. Refresh. So now that is gone. So 42 is gone now. Okay, and now the next thing is that let's say you would like to change the planning time fence and not respecting the planning time fence that we have updated in the material master. So here we have provided 10 days in the material master, and based on that we see the planning time fence as 9/4/2023. But I don't want to use this as my planning time fence. So I can actually set a firming date manually. So let me choose let's say 12th of April, and this is my manual firming date. So now it says that the firming date has been set to be 12/4/2023, and then click on refresh. Now you see that the date has been moved to 12/4/2023. So what if I move this date maybe beyond 1st of May? So my expectation is that the planned order should move below this firming date and should have a firming indicator. So let's do that. Change the firming date to maybe 6th and then refresh. So it happened the same way as we expected. Okay, this is how it works. So let's see a different scenario with the MRP type M3. So I'm going to change the material master with the MRP type M3, and then click on save. And let's take a look at the MRP type 3, the M3 configuration. Production, MRP, master data, MRP types, M3. It says that manual firming and order proposals are basically rescheduled out. And whereas the option 2 for the M2, it said that the automatic firming without order proposal. Okay, so it means that the planned orders will not be generated for the requirements lying within the planning time fence, right? So let me go back to MD04, okay, and do a refresh, and you can see that the firming has been removed, and that is happening based on the settings we have in the MRP type as in the MRP type M3, because this is a manual selection of the firming date. So let me remove this firming date here, the manual one, and just do a refresh. So now we are back to 9th of April as our end of planning time fence. So let me run MPS now. Okay, do a refresh, and now you can see that the planned orders are not created that are lying within the planning time fence. So they have been moved outside of the planning time fence, but it has been notified to the user or the planner with the help of the rescheduling date. So now he will take a look at the planning situation and change the change the production date or the planning date to 1/3. So let me do that. So here I'm going to put it as the start date should be 1/3, which is not possible, but just for the demo purpose I am showing it. And the end date, let's say it ends on 10/3. Okay, so now the opening date, it is automatically calculated in the backward scheduling from the order start date. So now I'm going to click on save and then refresh. So now we can see that the planned order has been moved inside of the planning time fence and has got a firming indicator, right? So if I go into the details of this planned order, now you can see that the firming indicator has been activated or checked. So this happened because the user has actually changed the dates of the planned order manually without respecting the dates provided by the MPS run, right? So that is how it basically works. And there is another option in the while using the MRP types relevant for the MPS, that is basically with the MRP groups. So let me go to the configuration here, and here in the MRP groups, carry out overall maintenance of MRP groups, and here in the plant 1000 I'm going to choose the MRP group, let's say 0010, and here we have the planning time fence. Yeah, so in the details of the MRP group, we can also maintain the planning time fence and also the roll forward horizon. So this roll forward horizon, it basically helps to delete the planned orders which are basically lying in the past or maybe in the future when compared with the planning time fence. So let's say if by looking at this situation, so now the planner, he knows that the planned order created for the PIR in the month of March is absolute. It makes no sense for them, right? So they are already late in manufacturing or planning the material for this particular PIR. So now he don't want to basically have this planned order open in the MD04. So he wants it to be deleted automatically by the system. So this is where the planner can actually use this function of roll forward, right? So let's say if he would like to delete the proposals that are lying within the planning time fence, maybe for uh, 30 days. So for that reason, he will basically assign the days as 30, and since we are going into the past, it would be minus. So it means that the proposals lying within the planning time fence and which are past 30 days from the planning time fence will be deleted automatically by the system. So usually we can have like maybe 10 days. Okay, so which means that the planned orders which are lying within the planning time fence again and which are 10 days into the past starting from the planning time fence, those will be removed automatically. So let's say if you would like to delete the planned orders in the future, then you just need to remove this minus and leave it as 10, which means that the planned orders lying after the planning time fence and 10 days into the future. So those planned orders will be deleted, right? So that's what the purpose of this roll forward horizon is basically. So once you assign these configurations in the MRP group, we can directly assign the MRP group in the material master. So if you have, if you go into the MRP one view, you have this field to assign the MRP group. So this is where you can assign the group, the values automatically assigned in the MRP group for 0010. Okay. So you just do a drop down here and you could see the values that are basically created by us. So we just discussed on this particular MRP group 0010, and this is what we have here. Okay. So that is how the MPS basically runs.